KTLK AM 1150, it is your voice. I'm David Cruz. We're talking about the president's sweeping and wide-ranging plan to really reshape higher education in America. Well, who better than Professor Peter Mathews, who himself is in the world of academia, to come in and break it down for me. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Great to be here, Dave.
All right, so the president says that what he wants to do is reward schools that are doing a better job because he says we're pumping so much money into schools, but we're not getting the results or the product the way we ought to be. I want to change that. This is not going to be popular with some schools, Peter.
Well, I think he's got a simplistic understanding. He needs to get a bit of a better grasp on it. For example, he wants to rate schools on tuition affordability, on the percent of low-income students enrolled, graduation rates, and the debt level of graduates. Now, those are all noble criteria, but here's the problem. You know, if he just goes strictly by that, he's not going to be able to find out what the real problem is, because the real problem is that the states of the United States, all the state governments, have been cutting huge amounts of money out of education funding, and that's why the tuitions have been going up. And that's why the graduation rates have been slower, because when students have to work 2 or 3 jobs to pay the tuitions, they can't take the classes they need.
All right, but the average student is graduating with a debt of about $26,000 or more. I know people who have $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, up to $100,000 in debt. How do you come out from under a debt like that? Because it follows you right to the grave.
Right to the grave. It's overwhelming. And many students are coming out of college without the ability to get jobs because the economy has shrunk. And that's another problem that compounds everything.
And I know that was one of the things the president talked about, that he also wants to see which schools are the most successful at placing people into jobs. Maybe that's why Loyola a few days ago said that they were going to ratchet back enrollment here in Los Angeles and around the country, because they're getting complaints from graduates who says, hey, you gave me an education, I still can't get work.
A job. I'm also in debt, right? That's a problem. So here's the thing. Look at UC tuition. It's $13,000 a year right now. CSU is $6,200 a year, and community colleges had a increase 3 or 4 times in the last 6 or 7 years. So what I'm trying to say here is we need to get the tuitions back down, because tuition used to be free back in the 60s and 70s at UC and CSU. And Governor Schwarzenegger, Governor Pete Wilson paid 0 tuition at UC Berkeley and Santa Monica College. So we need to get the government to subsidize these tuitions and make sure the money is spent wisely as well, Dave. You can't waste money either.
Tell me about this, Peter. You're a professor, and so you're out there in the classroom. Tell me this. Why is it, and California's not too different, why is it that only maybe 6 in 10, to be more specific, only 58% of full-time students who went into college since 2004, only 58% earned a 4-year degree within 6 years? What's going on that some of the kids are dropping out? Is it the economic reality that their families face?
It is absolutely that, and we also have another interesting study that shows that the best predictor of success of a student going through K through 12, going on to college and graduating, is the level of family income. So the lower income family, the lower third of our income ladder, they have a very difficult time graduating because of a lack of support in the home, because parents are working overtime. They can't do the homework with them. They don't have the after-school programs and things going on like in the wealthier areas. For example, in my area where I live, it's upper middle class in Belmont Heights and Long Beach. There's a school called Fremont Elementary School where my daughter will be going, right? Mm-hmm. Science lab and computer labs were threatened to be shut down 7 years ago. You know what the parents did, Dave? They had a lemonade stand out there, and they raised a few dollars on that, but mostly they wrote checks. $100,000 a year were raised by the parents to keep the science and computer labs open. Now, in other areas, lower income areas, you can't keep those labs open.
Yeah, because some people can't afford it, Peter.
They can't afford to keep up the private money coming in with the public money, which has been cut. So I think that's what's cut back on the success of college graduates in terms of getting out of and getting a degree. And one more thing, Dave, look at Europe. In the European countries that compete with us, like Germany, the tuition is still free over there. It's tuition-free education all the way through medical school, engineering school, and they have apprenticeship programs. They partner with business and the university to create apprenticeship programs and technology programs where young people don't have to go for a 4-year college degree. They can get a 2-year degree, and they honor them with high wages.
I understand that, Peter, but, you know, they're also, in some cases, more of a socialist environment because, let's face it, I mean, the taxing mechanisms that they use would not necessarily be supported here in the U.S. I mean, we can talk about Canada as well. But let me say this to you. The president today speaks about value. Let me go back to the president talking about how he wants every American family to have an opportunity. Listen to this, Peter.
So whether we're talking about a 2-year program, a 4-year program, a technical certificate, bottom line is higher education cannot be a luxury. It's an economic imperative. Every American family should be able to afford to get it. Today, I'm proposing major new reforms that will shake up the current system, create better incentives for colleges to do more with less, and deliver better value for students and their families.
I think that it sounds good, but in practice, I mean, if we look at the state of California, let me give you one example. There is a professor at CSUN, and again, I refer to CSUN because Professor Rudy Acuna, back in the day when he was teaching
I know him, by the way,
Chicano studies,
yeah.
He would let kids come in and sit on the floor if they had no desks. Mm-hmm. The school no longer allows that. If you do not have a desk, you cannot sit in that classroom. And I'm thinking, although there were some who said, my gosh, they're going to college sitting on the floor, these kids were so hungry to continue their studies, they were willing to go through these things. The president speaks in lofty terms of something that he'd like to see happen, but in practice, Peter, is it possible for every family to truly have access to education the way things are looking today?
It is only if it is really fully funded, Dave, and that's the
fully
problem.
Funded.
Fully funded. And, you know, if we don't fund education, we won't have the high technology economy that we need to produce better jobs and to pay more money into education. You remember back in the 60s and 70s, like I said, in the 70s, tuition-free education, and we ended up having a technology revolution just 10 years later. It came out of that with highly educated people.
I mean, look at the innovation companies that were born in that time.
Exactly.
Because people actually were doing that.
And we have to make sure we put that as a priority and acknowledge it. It's going to cost something. Nothing is for free.
Okay, the rating system that you spoke about, the president mentions it. Now you're going to a rating system, almost where it's a Consumer Reports on academics now in America. It really doesn't tell the whole story, but I'm wondering how many parents are going to be looking at this scorecard and say, our child is going to this school, not that one, because this one has a higher rating than the other. And here's my concern. If we look only at test scores, if we look only at numbers, it may not give us the full look. My daughter, for instance, she applied to some of the top schools in America and didn't get accepted. She went to Mills College in Northern California, wonderful little private school, flourished at the school. I brag about it all the time. I would like listeners who are tuned in. It's a women's college. They allow a few guys in there. But let me tell you something. Hillary Clinton went there, and I can tell you something. It is an empowering campus. Smaller,
yes,
but an empowering campus. I guess if I had looked at it on a scorecard, Peter, I don't think I would have given it a second glance, and yet, for my daughter, it was the right fit. So how do parents, as we wrap this puppy up, how do they make the right choice?
They have to actually visit the college or at least get more information about it and look at the quality of education, not just the quantity. And that's what I'm afraid the president's plan might end up becoming a diploma mill. For colleges to get more money, they're going to graduate students, push them right through without the knowledge. And so, you see, I believe we're not building cars, Dave, in college. We are building human beings.
Great line.
We got to remember that.
I'll tell you something. We're going to come back because something else happened today that kind of ties into this. It's the state of where we are today in America. We talked about education. By golly, these kids leave school. They want to get a job. And it's hard for them to succeed at doing that. Maybe the first generation that will have a tougher time than we did. Coming back, we're going to look at what happened today on Wall Street, including Nasdaq, shutting down for 3 hours. They had some troubles there, but I think the troubles go deeper than just that. Right now, though.
Your voice, KTLK AM 1150.
KTLK AM 1150. It is your voice. I'm David Cruz. Professor Peter Mathews is in with us right now. I'll tell you something, as I look at a couple of stories today, after we talk about educating kids, obviously you got to go into the job market, into the real world out there. Not that an education is not the real world, but, you know, now you got to go out and try to get a paycheck. Wells Fargo today announces they're laying off 2,300 people. 2,300. That's a lot of people to lay off, and you know, we're at the tail end of summer. We're headed off into the fall. Not exactly a great time, Peter, to be looking for work. Okay, Professor, what is this a signal of? We see that. I know that Nasdaq had a little technical glitch. They shut down for 3 hours, but I think the problems are deeper than technical. What I'm saying is, we've talked about this before, but let me begin with Wells Fargo, the largest mortgage lender in America, laying off 2,300 people. What does that say about the rocky economy in which we're still in?
It says that we haven't climbed out of the Great Recession yet because of a lack of demand, Dave. And again, you got to have capital to start those businesses up and hire people. And you can't be laying off firefighters, police, and teachers and then expecting them to go out and buy these products. For example, even the tech market, there were thousands of layoffs by companies like, I believe, Dell and some of the hardware producers. Mm-hmm. Thousands of layoffs in technology because people aren't buying those products anymore. They just can't afford them. So we have to get back this, get the stimulate what you call demand side of economics going. Mm-hmm. You've got to get money into people's hands by creating jobs and restoring those layoffs of firefighters, teachers, and all the other people involved, policemen. So I think that's what it has to do with. Like you said, it's just a technical glitch that happened today. They call it a flash freeze, but that's over with. It's also rattling the markets a bit because they're worried about the technical side going bad sometimes.
Well, let's talk deeper about then where the president is focused right now. Are we sort of doing the distraction move? In other words, look, the problem is right here in front of me. It's the payrolls being met today. Yes. Unemployment still, hovering above 8%, 8.5%, 8.7% in California. So are we using the distraction move where we're now, let's look at the next generation, but what about the people right now who are still in the workforce out of necessity, people retiring later than ever before?
Absolutely. It ends up being a distraction because the real problem is jobs. And it's like, getting these young people back to go to work so they can earn a living like we had. There's the first generation that'll do worse than the previous generation in American history. So that's the problem. And we can fix that, David. We just get our heads together. What I've always advocated is bringing in some investment, in the terms of private capital and public capital to create jobs. And we can do that if the politicians will be honest about where the money is.
Well, I heard a story today. Vanessa was sharing with me, yesterday we talked, or Tuesday, we talked about maglev, and in a moment we'll talk about it more. But they're thinking of an idea. Let's see. She mentioned that they're looking at an idea of actually tunneling under the 405 as a way of moving people in a new and different way across Southern California. Here's my point. Infrastructure, repairing roads, no doubt, has put a lot of people to work temporarily. But if we're going to re-energize California, getting people from here to there with new technology and getting people to innovate again, that seems to be the key to the recovery and sustainable recovery.
Absolutely. In fact, my wife was offered a job in San Francisco, starting out at $75,000 a year when she first graduated from college 10 years ago. And she couldn't take it because we were together, and she didn't want to leave me. But if we had a maglev train like they have in some of these other countries, in 1 hour she could be in San Francisco and commute every day, or I could commute from there to here and teach here.
She would be able to get to and from work faster than I get from my house to the studio.
There you go. And she could even do work on the train if she wanted to, or do whatever she has to. That's the point I'm trying to make. If we create these new technologies, especially with transportation, you could release Americans from what's called job lock. It's not just job loss, there's job lock, where people can't get jobs that are available a few miles away because they can't commute that far. They can't leave their town to go somewhere else because they have roots here. But with good transportation systems, you could do that, Dave. And that's what that'll do as well.
Well, I'll tell you, it's encouraging to see the president out and about talking to college kids and about what parents are facing. But again, unless we can create some new opportunities in the workforce, it's going to be awfully difficult. Trade coming into Southern California, a big factor, but we need to have a public that is not just a consumer public in America, but also one that is obviously manufacturing and creating our own economy back home.
Absolutely. You could create things like solar panels and windmills and tide power generators to produce a new electric grid. Those products would be made here. See, China right now is the #1 solar panel exporter in the world. They took over from Germany because they have the engineers to do it and, of course, the cheap labor. But we could do it here with high quality and good labor. We could build them right here at 7. We have to do those kinds of things, Dave.
Professor Peter Mathews, thank you again for joining me today. It's been a good conversation. I think it gives us a lot to chew on. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Obviously, as the president is encouraging people to think about education, and we touch on the other aspects, which are technology glitches and things like that that can go wrong, one of the things that we here in California are considering is, can we continue to lose businesses that are going outside of California? For instance, companies that say it's a state that needs to be friendlier for job creators. And it isn't necessarily a friendly state for job creators. I mean, you can literally go across the state line into Nevada, Oregon, or Arizona and be far better off from a taxing standpoint, incentive standpoint, if you're a small business. This is why, I mean, let's face it, guys, even companies like Apple have used our turf to be a launching pad, but now where do they house most of their intellectual prowess? They do it, Scotland or Ireland somewhere where they can have the tax havens that they want? There's a lot of stuff here that can be fixed. But I think it's going to take honest talk, and I think what we need to do is to be able to move experts who understand the economic reality and who are talking to people. You know, Peter's out there in the San Pedro, Long Beach community, getting the pulse of that community. If we can take that to Sacramento, if we can take it to D.C. and connect that reality with what policymakers are really deciding, I think we're going to make some progress. That's the future in our state. This idea of having career politicians who simply move from one job to another, as one term expires or they're termed out, they go from one job to another. Those are recycled minds. We need fresh thinking. We need people who are touching working communities. That's you and me. And that's where it starts. Love that community out there, Long Beach and San Pedro. Hello to all my friends out there, Signal Hill and Wilmington. Good, hard-working people. Right, Mondo? What do the kids say about that area? They say...
Oh, they love that place.
There we go. All right, guys. We're going to continue. When we come back, one of the stories that I also...